The Vare fleet stopped firing at the exact moment humanity began to break. Not retreat, not reposition, not hesitate. They stopped. Drav knew something was wrong before anyone said it out loud. The silence didn't feel like mercy. It felt like interruption. He stood at the forward observation glass, watching the battlefield hang frozen in the dead light of a collapsing star. Human ships, what remained of them, drifted in fractured arcs, engines sputtering, hulls torn open like wounds that hadn't finished bleeding. And beyond them, the Vare. Still, perfectly still. They've locked position, Selvarn said from behind him, voice low, controlled, already processing angles and outcomes that no longer seemed to matter. All units. No weapon charge. No forward motion. Drav didn't respond. Because he was watching something else. The pattern. It wasn't random. It never was with the Vare. Their ships held distance with surgical precision, each one placed exactly where it needed to be, not to attack, but to observe. That was new. We're still in kill range, Sel added. If this is a delay, it doesn't benefit them. Nothing they do is for our benefit, Drav said quietly. Across the deck, alarms had faded into low, exhausted tones. Damage control crews moved slower now, not from lack of urgency, but from knowing urgency wasn't enough anymore. Illyra Voss stepped into the command ring without asking permission. She never did. They had us, she said, blunt, breath sharp from the run-up through failing corridors. Another 30 seconds, and we were finished. Drav nodded once. I know. Her eyes burned into him. So why aren't we? That question hung there. Heavy. Unanswered. Because there was no tactical reason. No mechanical failure in the Vare formation. No disruption in their systems. Every scan still showed the same impossible efficiency they'd demonstrated across 100 dead human worlds. They didn't make mistakes. Which meant this. Wasn't one. Sel's console flickered as new data streamed in. He frowned slightly. That alone was enough to draw attention. They've done this before, he said. Drav turned, just enough to look at him. Sel expanded the display. Battle logs. Previous encounters. Timestamps layered over one another. Every major human loss. Every collapse. And in each one, a gap. A pause. Illyra stepped closer. What am I looking at? Sel didn't look away from the data. Intervals, he said. Moments where they stop advancing. For what? Sel hesitated. That was worse than any answer. Drav felt it then. Not fear. Recognition. They're not stopping for themselves, he said. Illyra's voice dropped. Then who? Drav turned back to the viewport. To the silent, waiting fleet that had already proven it could erase them whenever it chose. They're stopping, he said slowly, for us. A faint tone cut through the quiet. Incoming transmission. Not routed through standard channels. Not encoded. Direct. Sel's fingers hovered over the controls. That's not possible. Drav didn't hesitate. Put it through. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the stars dimmed, not physically, but perceptually, as if something vast had leaned closer to listen. The voice that followed was precise. Cold. Unmistakably certain. Human command entity identified. Illyra's hand drifted toward her sidearm out of pure instinct. Drav didn't move. We have observed your pattern, the voice continued. No distortion. No emotion. No urgency. Just fact. Sel whispered, almost to himself, observed. A pause. Measured. Exact. You delay. The word landed harder than any weapon strike. Drav's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. You hesitate, the voice added. Illyra's expression darkened. We're dying out here, and they think we're hesitating. Drav raised a hand. Not to silence her. To hold the moment in place. Because something in that voice wasn't finished. We will allow continuation, it said. Another pause. Longer. Heavier. To confirm behavioral limits. The transmission ended. Just like that. No threat. No demand. No negotiation. Only certainty. Sel exhaled slowly. They're not trying to kill us. Illyra stared at the empty dark beyond the glass. No, she said. Her voice dropped. They're trying to understand us. Drav didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Because the realization settling into him was worse than annihilation. Out there, beyond the broken ships and dying light, an entire species had decided humanity wasn't something to destroy yet. Something to study. And the only reason they were still alive was because they hadn't finished measuring how humans break. Drav didn't give the order to move. That was the first thing Sel noticed. Not because it was unusual, but because it was expected. Every surviving ship in the scattered formation was waiting for it. Engines idling at the edge of failure. Pilots holding vectors that made no tactical sense anymore except one. Wait for command. And command said nothing. They're giving us space, Cell said, eyes scanning the widening gap between their ships. Not much, but enough to attempt a break. Illyra turned sharply. Then we take it. Drav remained at the glass, watching, counting, feeling something beneath the moment that didn't belong to battle. They want us to move, he said. Illyra's patience snapped. Of course they do. That's what enemies. No, Drav cut in. Quiet. Final. They want to see how we decide to move. That slowed her. Not stopped, just enough. Cell's gaze shifted between them. He's right, he said. Look at their spacing. It's not optimal for interception. It's optimal for observation. Every escape vector gives them maximum visibility on response timing. Illyra clenched her jaw. So we just sit here and let them watch us die slower? No, Drav said. Finally, he turned. But there was no urgency in his movement. That was what unsettled her most. We give them something real to watch. Cell frowned. Define real. Drav stepped toward the command ring, eyes already moving through projections, not as a strategist, but as someone searching for a pattern behind the pattern. They think hesitation is our limit, he said. Illyra crossed her arms. Then prove them wrong. Drav glanced at her. A flicker of something passed between them. History, tension, something unfinished. I tried that once, he said. She didn't soften. And you waited instead. Cell's eyes narrowed slightly. What is that supposed to? Tell him, Illyra said, not looking away from Drav. Tell him what happens when you wait too long. The room shifted. Subtly. Drav didn't move for a moment. Then, World Celt, he said. Cell went still. Everyone knew the name. Not because of what it was. Because of how it ended. We had a window, Drav continued. A narrow one. We could have struck first. Broken their advance before it fully formed. Illyra's voice dropped. But you wanted to talk. I wanted to be sure. And while you were being sure, she said, sharper now, they erased 12 million people. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Cell looked back at the projections, then at the Vare fleet, understanding something new. They logged that, he said quietly. Drav nodded. Yes. Illyra blinked. What? Cell turned fully toward her. Every delay, every hesitation, every time we waited instead of acting, they saw it. Her expression hardened. So what? So they learned it, Cell said. Modeled it. Built it into their expectations. Drav's voice followed. And now they're testing it. Silence pressed in again. Heavier this time. Because now it had shape. Meaning. Illyra shook her head once, slow. No, she said. No, that's... A sharp alarm cut through her words. Not impact. Not incoming fire. Trajectory shift. Cell's console lit up. They're adjusting outer arcs, closing in again. Slow. Controlled. Drav stepped closer. Timing. Cell's eyes flicked rapidly across data. They're matching our command delay intervals. Illyra stared at him. Say that again. They're tightening their formation based on how long we take to decide, Cell said. Not seconds, patterns. Behavioral rhythm. Drav exhaled slowly. They're pacing the battle to us. Illyra looked back at the viewport. At the silent, patient fleet. They're not fighting us, she said. Cell shook his head. No. Drav finished it. They're studying the moment before we choose. The words settled into something cold. Something precise. Another tone cut in, internal this time. Fleet chatter spiking across open channels. Fragments of voices. Confusion. Fear. Waiting for orders. We can make a break. Just say when. Command. We're losing power. Drav closed his eyes briefly. Listened. Not to the words. To the space between them. Every voice asking the same thing. When? That was what the Vare were measuring. Not what humans did. When they decided to do it. He opened his eyes. Decision sat there. Heavy. Familiar. Illyra stepped closer. Drav. He didn't look at her. You hesitate again, she said, quieter now. And they win without firing. Cell added, softer. But if we act too soon, we confirm their model. Drav nodded once. Yes. That was the trap. Wait too long, die. Act too soon. Prove them right. Either way, they learned. Illyra's voice sharpened. Then break the pattern. Drav finally looked at her. How? She didn't answer immediately. Because there was no easy version of that answer. Cell spoke instead. We need something they can't predict, he said. Not faster, not slower. Something outside the pattern entirely. Drav's gaze drifted again, past them, out into the silent formation of a species that believed it was watching the final moments of something inferior. They think they understand our limits, he said. Illyra's eyes narrowed. Then show them they don't. Drav took a breath. Then another. The weight of kelp pressed in behind his ribs. 12 million lives. One decision too late. He could feel that moment again. The hesitation. The need to be certain. And the cost of it. Cell's voice cut in, quieter now. If we do nothing, they keep adjusting. Keep learning. Eventually, there won't be a move left they haven't already seen. Drav nodded. I know. Illyra stepped closer still. Close enough that her voice didn't need to carry. Then stop waiting. The words landed harder than anything the Vare had said. Because they weren't analysis. They weren't observation. They were judgment. Drav met her eyes. For a moment, the past and present aligned. The same choice. The same weight. The same cost waiting on either side. Outside, the Vare formation tightened again. Not aggressively. Precisely. Waiting for the next human delay to confirm what they already believed. Drav exhaled. Slow. Controlled. Then, signal all ships, he said. Cell straightened. What are we telling them? Drav's voice didn't rise. Didn't harden. It just settled. Nothing yet. Illyra stared at him. Drav. We move, he said, cutting her off, when it matters. Cell's brow furrowed. And how do we know when that is? Drav turned back to the viewport. The Vare waited. Unmoving. Certain. Watching the moment stretch. Counting it. Measuring it. Because they'll think it's too late, he said. And for the first time, there was something in his voice the Vare had never measured before. Not hesitation. Not doubt. Something quieter. Something worse. Intent. The moment didn't come all at once. It stretched. Thinned. Pulled tight between too many failing systems and too many lives hanging on a decision no one could see yet. Across the fleet, voices kept bleeding through the open channel. Reactors dropping below threshold. We can't hold position much longer. Command, we need vector authorization, now. Cell muted none of it. He let it fill the space. Let it press in. Because this pressure, this breaking point, this was what the Vare were measuring. Drav stood still at the center of it. Listening. Not to the fear. To the timing. Illyra watched him like she was waiting for something to snap. You're doing it again, she said. He didn't answer. Drav. Still nothing. Her voice sharpened. People are dying while you. I know exactly how many, he said. Quiet. Precise. That stopped her. Cell glanced at the side display, then back at Drav. You've been tracking loss intervals, he said. Drav nodded once. Yes. Not casualties. Intervals. Time between failure points. Time between voices going silent. Time between decisions that came too late. Illyra's expression shifted, not softer, but recalibrated. What are you waiting for? She asked. Drav's eyes stayed forward. For them to believe they're right. Cell exhaled slowly. They already do. Not completely, Drav said. He gestured toward the viewport. Look at their formation. The Vare ships had tightened further, but not evenly. There were slight asymmetries now. Small corrections layered over their perfect geometry. Adjustments. Continuous. Unending. They're still refining, Drav said. Still aligning their model to us. Cell leaned closer to the projection. They're narrowing prediction windows. Illyra frowned. Speak clearly. They're getting more confident, Cell said. Each delay we give them sharpens their expectations of when we'll act. Drav nodded. And when we don't match that expectation, he said, that's when it breaks. Illyra's eyes narrowed. So we just wait until they're absolutely certain? Yes. Her jaw tightened. And how many do we lose getting there? Drav didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer that made that acceptable. Another voice cut across the channel. This one weaker, strained. Hull breach. Losing atmosphere. Silence followed it. Permanent. Cell closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. They're mapping collapse thresholds too, he said quietly. Not just decision timing, failure tolerance. Drav felt that one. Deeper than the rest. They're learning how long we can endure before we break, he said. Illyra took a step forward. Then don't break. He looked at her. And for the first time, there was something raw behind his composure. That's not how breaking works. The words hung there. Honest. Unprotected. She didn't look away. Then what is it? She asked. Drav held her gaze. It's choosing not to stop. A beat. Cell's eyes flicked between them. Outside, the Vare formation shifted again. Faster now. Their adjustments coming closer together. Shorter intervals. They're closing the gap, Cell said. Prediction windows are tightening. They're expecting a decision soon. Illyra turned back to the viewport. They think they've got us figured out. Drav nodded. They think they know exactly when we'll act. Another pause. Another human ship went dark. Another interval logged. Cell's voice dropped. We're running out of time to prove them wrong. Drav's fingers curled slightly at his side. Not from indecision. From containment. Good, he said. Illyra blinked. Good. He stepped forward. Closer to the glass. Closer to the silent, waiting fleet that believed it understood him. They need to be certain, he said. Not just confident. Certain. Cell's brow furrowed. Why? Drav didn't look away from the Vare. Because certainty is brittle. The words settled into the room like something that couldn't be undone. Outside, the Vare ships held their positions. No firing. No advance. Just waiting. Measuring. Their entire strategy built around a single assumption. Humans act within predictable limits. Illyra's voice lowered. And when we don't? Drav exhaled slowly. Then everything they built on that assumption collapses. Cell's console chimed again, sharp this time. Incoming transmission. All three of them went still. Same origin? Illyra asked. Cell nodded. Direct. No encryption. Drav didn't hesitate. Put it through. The voice returned. Korzeth. Unchanged in tone. But faster now. Human delay window exceeding prior models, it said. A pause. Shorter than before. Clarified deviation. Illyra let out a quiet, incredulous breath. They're asking why we haven't acted yet. Cell murmured. They're trying to correct their model. Drav stepped closer to the console. Transmit response. Cell glanced at him. What do I say? Drav's reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. The same man who had waited too long once before. The same weight pressing in again. This time, he didn't carry it alone. Tell them nothing, he said. Illyra's lips curled slightly. Let them sit in it. Drav nodded. Yes. The channel remained open. Silent. Heavy. Korzeth did not speak again immediately. For the first time, the Vare were waiting on them. Seconds passed. Then more. Long enough to stretch. Long enough to matter. Cell whispered. They're recalculating again. The Vare formation shifted, faster now. Not smooth. Not perfect. Tiny fractures forming in their precision. They're losing alignment, Cell said. Illyra watched it unfold. They don't like uncertainty. Drav's voice was quiet. No. Another adjustment. Sharper this time. One Vare ship overcorrected its position, just slightly. But enough to notice. Enough to matter. Cell's eyes widened. That's the first error I've seen from them. Illyra's gaze sharpened. Again. They watched. Waited. Another shift. Another correction. Another slight deviation. The pattern was breaking. Not collapsing. Cracking. Korzetha's voice returned. Faster. Less measured. Human behavior outside projected bounds. A pause. Then. Explain. Drav stepped forward. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just decided. You assumed we had limits, he said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was listening. Korzeth responded. Yes. Drav's eyes didn't leave the viewport. You assumed we would act when the pressure reached a certain point. Yes. You assumed hesitation meant we couldn't act sooner. A beat. Yes. Drav exhaled. Slow. Controlled. Then. You were right. Cell froze. Illyra turned sharply toward him. What? Drav didn't stop. We do have limits, he said. Korzetha's voice sharpened slightly. Confirmed. Cell whispered, Drav. But Drav kept going. We do hesitate. Confirmed. We do wait too long sometimes. Confirmed. Illyra stepped toward him. What are you doing? Drav's voice didn't change. But you misunderstood one thing. The Vare formation stilled. Not adjusting. Not correcting. Listening. Korzeth spoke. What variable was misidentified? Drav's gaze hardened. Not with anger. With clarity. The point where we stop. The words landed. And for the first time, nothing in the Vare formation moved. Not even slightly. Cell felt it immediately. They're not adjusting. Illyra's voice dropped. Why? Drav answered without looking away. Because they don't know what comes after that. A beat. Then another. Korzetha's voice returned. Slower now. Less certain. Clarify. Drav took a breath. And this time, there was no hesitation in it. When we reach our limit, he said quietly, we don't break. The silence deepened, tightened, something unseen shifting beneath it. Illyra's pulse spiked. Drav. He didn't stop. We change. Outside, the Vare formation began to move again. But not like before. Not clean. Not precise. Something in their alignment had slipped. Something small. Something critical. Cell whispered. Their model just failed. Drav's voice dropped to its lowest point. And you don't know what we become next. And for the first time since the war began, the Vare were no longer watching a species they understood. They were watching something they couldn't predict. The shift wasn't dramatic. That was what made it terrifying. The Vare didn't scatter. They didn't panic. They didn't fire. They recalculated. But slower. For the first time, the pauses between their adjustments stretched just a fraction too long. Their once perfect formation began to carry hesitation. Not human hesitation. Not emotional. Computational delay. Cell saw it first. They're looping, he said, voice tightening. Their predictive cycles aren't resolving cleanly anymore. Illyra stepped closer. Speak clearly. They're trying to reconcile two incompatible models, Cell said. One where we act within limits, and one where we don't. Drav didn't move. Good, he said quietly. Outside, a Vare ship shifted position, then corrected again. Too many adjustments. Too close together. They're overfitting, Cell whispered. Trying to force reality back into their framework. Illyra let out a slow breath. And it's not working. Drav's eyes stayed locked on the formation. No, he said. It isn't. Another human ship went dark behind them. Another voice cut out mid-transmission. Another interval logged. Cell flinched this time. Just slightly. They're still killing us, he said. Drav nodded. Yes. Illyra's voice hardened. Then whatever you're waiting for. It's almost there, Drav said. She stepped closer. Almost what? He didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't something you said. It was something you felt. The moment when pressure stopped building and started collapsing inward. Cell's console chimed sharply. Energy fluctuations across their fleet, he said. Not weapon charge, internal redistribution. They're reallocating processing across nodes. Illyra frowned. Why? Cell's voice dropped. Because they don't trust their own conclusions anymore. That landed. Hard. Drav exhaled slowly. They've never had to doubt themselves, he said. Outside, the Vare formation tightened again. But not evenly. Gaps formed. Micro-misalignments that didn't correct fast enough. They're trying to compensate, Cell said. But every adjustment creates more error. Illyra's eyes narrowed. Then push them. Drav finally turned. Not fully. Just enough. That's what this is, he said. Another transmission cut through. Immediate. Less controlled. Korzeth. Human behavior is non-compliant. It said. No pause this time. No measured spacing between words. Clarify termination threshold. Cell whispered. They're trying to define when we act. Drav stepped forward. Transmit. Cell didn't hesitate now. Channel open. Korzeth continued. Your species exhibits delay under pressure. Current deviation contradicts established parameters. Drav's voice was calm. Your parameters are wrong. A pause. Longer than before. You confirmed them, Korzeth replied. Yes, Drav said. Up to a point. Illyra watched him carefully. He wasn't arguing. He was guiding. Korzeth spoke again. Define point of divergence. Drav's reflection stared back at him. Not uncertain. Not fractured. Whole. When we decide, he said. Cell felt something shift in the room. Not in the systems. In Drav. Korzeth responded immediately. You always decide. Drav shook his head. No. That word landed heavier than anything before it. We don't. Silence. Deep. Searching. Illyra's voice dropped to a whisper. Drav. He didn't look at her. Most of the time, he continued, we're still choosing. Korzeth didn't respond. Not immediately. Because that didn't fit. Cell leaned forward slightly. They're stalling, he said. They can't categorize that state. Drav nodded. Exactly. Outside, another Vare ship drifted out of alignment. Just enough to break the perfect symmetry they had maintained since the war began. They need a defined moment, Cell said. A clear transition from indecision to action. Drav's voice lowered. And we're not giving it to them. Illyra's pulse hammered. So what happens when we do? Drav finally looked at her. This time fully. You'll know. The way he said it. There was no uncertainty left. That was new. Cell saw it too. He's not waiting anymore, he whispered. No, Illyra said. She understood it now. He's choosing when to stop. Outside, the Vare formation shifted again. Faster, less stable. Multiple ships correcting at once, their movements overlapping, interfering. They're destabilizing, Cell said. If they keep pushing this hard. They will, Drav said. Why? Because they can't accept uncertainty. Another transmission cut in. Layered this time. Multiple signals overlapping before resolving into Korzeth again. But strained. Human command entity. This state is inefficient. Drav almost smiled. Yes. A beat. Korzeth pressed. Then corrected. Drav's voice dropped. No. Silence. Absolute. The kind that made even the dying systems on the ship feel loud. Korzeth spoke again, slower now. Clarify intent. Drav stepped closer to the console. Closer to the moment. We're not correcting anything, he said. Cell felt it then. The edge. The point where something stops bending. And starts breaking. Korzeth's voice sharpened. Then you will be terminated. Drav nodded once. Yes. Illyra's breath caught. Not in fear. In recognition. Because this was it. Not a plan. Not a maneuver. A decision. Drav's eyes never left the viewport. Cell, he said quietly. Cell straightened instantly. Ready. Open fleet-wide channel. Done. Across the broken remains of humanity. The signal spread. Every ship. Every survivor. Every voice that had been waiting for a command. Drav didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. They think they know when we act, he said. Silence answered him. Listening. They think they understand our limits. Another pause. Long enough to matter. They're right. Illyra closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them. Steady. Drav's voice lowered. But they don't know what happens after. Cell's hands hovered over the console. Because something buried deep in the system architecture. Something old. Something never meant to be used lightly. Was responding. Waiting. For one thing. Authorization. Drav exhaled. Slow. Final. Then. Now, he said. And somewhere in the fleet. Something ancient stopped waiting. It didn't trigger all at once. That was the first sign something was wrong. Cell's console lit. Not with a surge, not with a command cascade, but with acknowledgments. Slow. Sequential. Ship by ship. Authorization received, Cell whispered. But, no execution command. Illyra snapped her gaze toward him. What? Drav didn't move. He was watching the fleet. They're waiting, Cell said. Every system tied to the protocol is primed, but nothing's firing. Illyra turned to Drav. You said now. I did. Then why isn't it happening? Drav's voice stayed calm. Because this isn't something you trigger. Another human ship went dark. Another voice cut out. Cell flinched. We're out of time for philosophy, Drav. This isn't philosophy, Drav said. He stepped closer to the viewport. Closer to the moment that had been building since before this battle even began. Its alignment. Outside, the human fleet, what remained of it, began to shift. Not fast. Not coordinated like a military maneuver. But deliberate. Each ship adjusting position by fractions. Angles correcting. Distances stabilizing. Cell's breath caught. They're synchronizing. Illyra frowned. To what? Drav didn't answer. Because the answer wasn't in any system. It was in them. Korzeth's voice cut through again, sharper now. Human fleet behavior deviating beyond acceptable variance. No pause. No measured spacing. Clarify. Drav didn't respond. He let the silence stretch again. Let it press back. Cell's eyes flicked between the shifting fleet and the incoming data. They're trying to recalculate again, but it's failing faster this time, he said. Too many variables changing at once. Illyra stepped closer to the glass. The movement out there didn't look like escape. Didn't look like attack. It looked like something being arranged. What are we building, she asked. Drav's reflection stared back at him. You'll see. Another ship adjusted. Then another. The pattern was too large to grasp from any single perspective, but Cell's console began to piece it together. Fragments of geometry. Impossible angles. Connections forming between ships that had no physical link. Cell's voice dropped. This isn't a formation. No, Drav said. It's a system. Korzeth spoke again, faster now. Human construct undefined. Clarify function. Drav remained silent. The Vare formation shifted violently this time. Multiple ships adjusting simultaneously, their movements overlapping in ways they hadn't before. They're trying to disrupt it, Cell said. They've detected structure. Of course they have, Drav said. Illyra's pulse spiked. Then they'll attack. Yes. The word landed with certainty, and right on cue. The Veer fired. Not in a wave. Not in overwhelming force. Precise. Targeted. Beams lanced through the void, striking the outermost human ships as they moved into position. The first ship hit. Didn't explode. Didn't fragment. It flickered. Then vanished. Cell stumbled back. What was that? Another beam. Another ship. Gone. Clean. Impossible. They're not destroying them, Illyris said, voice tight. They're removing them, Cell finished. Drav watched it happen. Didn't flinch. Good, he said. Illyris snapped toward him. Good. Another ship vanished. Then another. The pattern out there didn't collapse. It adapted. Every loss tightening the structure. Refining it. Cell's hands trembled slightly over the console. It's compensating, whatever this is. It's using the losses as part of the system. Korzetha's voice cut through again. Faster. Strained. Human fleet integrity compromised. A pause. Short. Construct degradation detected. Drav shook his head. No. Another ship vanished. The pattern deepened. Locked. Korzeth spoke again. Clarify. Drav stepped forward. Closer to the glass. Closer to the thing they had become. You're not breaking it, he said. Another beam. Another ship gone. You're completing it. Silence. Then, the Veer fired faster. Less precise. More ships targeted at once. Cell's voice dropped to a whisper. They're trying to stop it before it stabilizes. Illyris stared at the unfolding pattern. They don't understand what they're doing. Drav's voice was quiet. No. Another ship vanished. The structure pulsed. Not with light. With absence. Something in space itself tightening around the shape they had formed. Cell's console flared. Drav, whatever this is, it's reaching critical threshold. Illyris stepped closer. What happens when it finishes? Drav didn't answer immediately, because the truth was that no one had ever seen it finish before. Korzetha's voice came again. Layered now. Multiple signals overlapping. Unidentified phenomenon detected. A pause. Longer than any before it. Explain. Drav didn't respond. He let them sit in it. The same way they had made humanity sit in uncertainty. Another ship vanished. The pattern tightened. Locked deeper. Cell whispered. This isn't just spatial alignment. It's rewriting something. Illyra's voice dropped. Rewriting what? Drav's answer came quietly. The rules. Outside. The last connection snapped into place. The pattern completed. For one single moment. Everything stopped. The Veer. The fleet. The stars themselves seeming to hold position. Korzeth spoke one final time before it began. What is this? Drav's voice didn't rise. Didn't harden. It just ended the question. This is where we stop waiting. And the universe answered. The answer didn't arrive as force. It arrived as absence. The stars nearest the formation bent first. Not pulled, not distorted by mass, but displaced, as if something had quietly rewritten where they were allowed to exist. Cell's console went dark for half a second, then came back wrong. Coordinates flickered, unable to settle. Distances stretched, collapsed, redefined faster than the system could track. That's not a field, he said, voice barely holding together. There's no emission, no source. It's rewriting spatial relationships. Illyra gripped the edge of the command ring. Speak clearly. Cell swallowed. Space isn't behaving consistently anymore. Outside, the pattern the fleet had formed. No, the absence where the fleet had been, expanded. Not outward like an explosion. Outward like a boundary deciding where it belonged. The nearest Veer ship reacted instantly, engines flaring as it attempted to withdraw. It moved, and didn't. Its position split, one version sliding back, another lagging behind, a third holding still. For a fraction of a second, it existed in disagreement with itself. Then, it vanished. No debris, no flash, no energy signature. Just gone. Illyra's breath caught. Cell didn't speak, because there was nothing in his training that covered this. Korzetha's voice broke through. For the first time. Unstable. Spatial coherence failure detected. A pause. Too long. Corrective measures. The transmission fractured mid-sentence. Multiple signals overlapping, colliding, failing to resolve. They can't maintain shared state, Cell whispered. Their network depends on synchronized reality mapping. This is breaking it. Another Veer ship touched the edge of the expanding boundary. It didn't even have time to react. Gone. The boundary continued. Slow. Inevitable. Illyra forced herself to look at it. Can we stop this? Drab didn't look away. No. Not because he didn't want to. Because the question didn't apply anymore. Outside, the Vare formation collapsed. Not into chaos, but into contradiction. Ships trying to move in directions that no longer aligned with each other. Vectors crossing. Interfering. Undoing themselves. They're trying to retreat, Cell said. But direction isn't stable. They don't know which way is out. Korzetha's voice returned. Fragmented. Human construct. Terminate. This state is. The signal cut. Reformed. Unacceptable. Drav stepped forward. Unacceptable for who? He asked. Cell glanced at him. There was no anger in Drav's voice. No triumph. Just finality. Outside, another Vare ship reached the boundary. It stretched. A thin line pulled across positions that couldn't exist together. Then vanished. The boundary pulsed. Deeper now. Closer to the core of the Vare fleet. Illyra's voice dropped. They're losing control. Drav nodded once. They never had it. Cell's console flickered again. Their signals are degrading. Recursive loops, unresolved states. They're trying to compute their way out of something that doesn't follow computation. Korzeth spoke again. Slower. Strained. Human strategy exceeds defined parameters. A pause. Then, reclassification required. Drav said nothing. He let the silence answer. Another ship vanished. Then another. The Vare movements grew sharper. More desperate. Ships accelerating into conflicting paths, some colliding not physically, but logically, their positions overlapping in ways that forced immediate correction. They're breaking their own system trying to fix this, Cell said. Illyra's gaze hardened. Good. But Drav didn't echo it. Because what was happening out there wasn't victory. It was consequence. Another transmission cut in. Not Korzeth. Different. Softer. Thyrol. Human behavior reevaluated. The voice carried something new. Not emotion. Not exactly. But something that hadn't been present before. Uncertainty. Drav didn't speak. He listened. They do not lack efficiency, Thyrol continued. A pause. They contain it. Illyra's breath slowed. Cell didn't move. Outside, the boundary reached the center of what remained of the Vare formation. Ships attempted final escape vectors. All failing. There was nowhere left that still behaved like space. Thyrol spoke again. Quieter. As if the conclusion was still forming even as everything ended. Delay is not weakness. Another ship vanished. It is selection. The boundary pulsed. Closer. Final. Korzetha's voice returned, barely holding together. Human command, cease. Drav didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because there was nothing left to negotiate. Nothing left to measure. Nothing left to learn. Outside, the last Vare ship reached the boundary. And disappeared. Just like the rest. The expansion stopped. Not because it hit a limit. Because it was done. The stars settled back into place. Coordinates stabilized. Distance meant something again. Cell's console went quiet. Completely. No enemy signals. No residual traces. Nothing. Illyra lowered her hands slowly. They're gone. Drav stood at the glass. Still. Yes. Cell swallowed. Not destroyed, not displaced, just. Drav finished it. Removed. Silence followed. Heavy. Real. Behind them, the surviving fleet drifted. What remained? Less than a third. Scarred. Alive. Illyra stepped closer to Drav. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. What did we just become? Drav didn't answer right away. He looked out at the stars. Steady again. Unchanged. As if nothing had happened. But something had. Something that wouldn't be forgotten. We didn't become anything, he said quietly. Illyra frowned. Then what was that? Drav's reflection stared back at him. Not uncertain. Not divided. Whole. That, he said, was what we were always holding back. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried something now. Something that would travel. Beyond this system. Beyond what they could see. Because somewhere out there, something else would hear about this. And understand just enough to stay very, very far away. No one celebrated. There was no surge of relief. No voices rising in triumph across the comms. No release of tension into laughter or disbelief. Just quiet. The kind that settles after something irreversible. Cell was the first to move again, though even that felt cautious, like motion itself needed permission now. I'm sweeping for residuals, he said, fingers gliding over controls that no longer fought back. Any trace. Energy echo. spatial distortion, anything. Illyra didn't look at him. And Cell paused, then shook his head. Nothing, he said. It's like it corrected itself. Drav's gaze remained on the stars. It didn't correct, he said. Cell frowned. Then what? Drav answered without turning. It closed. That word lingered, because it felt final in a way nothing else had. Illyra stepped forward, stopping beside him at the viewport. The reflection caught both of them now, two figures standing in front of a universe that looked exactly the same. And wasn't. How many, she asked. Cell didn't hesitate this time. 26% of the fleet, he said. That's what's left. Illyra closed her eyes briefly. Not to block it out. To hold it in place. They didn't even get a chance to fight back, she said quietly. Drav didn't respond. Because that was the point. Cell leaned back from the console, staring at the empty data field where the Vare had been. They were trying to understand us, he said. Illyra's voice carried a sharp edge again, but softer now. They should have stopped at fear. Cell exhaled slowly. They didn't think we were something to fear. Drav finally turned. They were right, he said. Both of them looked at him. Illyra frowned. What? Drav stepped away from the viewport. Slow. Grounded. They weren't wrong about what we are most of the time, he said. We hesitate. We argue. We wait too long. Cell's brow tightened. Then why did this? Because that's not all we are. The words settled deeper than anything before. Illyra studied him. And now? Drav didn't answer immediately. He walked past them, toward the center of the command ring, as if reorienting himself inside something that had shifted without moving. Behind him, the fleet drifted, ships slowly adjusting toward one another, not forming ranks, not rebuilding formation. Just closing distance. Instinct. Cell noticed it first. They're moving closer, he said. Illyra glanced at the display. No orders given. Drav nodded slightly. They don't need them. Another silence followed. But this one wasn't empty. It was shared. Cell's voice lowered. We can't do that again, can we? Drav shook his head. No. Not because it was impossible. Because it wasn't something you used twice. Illyra crossed her arms. Then what happens when something else comes? Drav looked back, toward the viewport. Toward the space that had erased a species. They'll come, he said. Cell blinked. After seeing this? Drav nodded. Yes. Illyra tilted her head slightly. Why? Drav's answer came quietly. Because they'll think they understand it. Cell let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Just like the Vare. Drav didn't smile. Yes. A soft tone broke the moment. Not an alert. Not a warning. A signal. Low energy. Wide broadcast. Cell turned back to the console. We've got something. Illyra straightened instantly. Contact. Cell hesitated. No. That word carried weight now. What is it, she asked. Cell adjusted the filters. It's coming from outside the system. Not directed. Just broadcasting. Drav stepped closer. Play it. The signal came through. Not a voice. Not language. A pattern. Simple. Repeating. A sequence of tones and silence that didn't try to communicate in any known structure. Illyra frowned. That's not a message. Cell tilted his head slightly. No variation. No response logic. It's not expecting an answer. Drav listened. Once. Then again. Something in it felt familiar. Not in sound. In intent. They're not talking to us, he said. Illyra glanced at him. Then who? Drav's eyes stayed on the console. They're talking about us. Cell's expression shifted. You think someone saw what happened here? Drav nodded once. Yes. The signal repeated again. Identical. Unchanging. Illyra's voice dropped. Is it a warning? Drav shook his head. No. Cell leaned in closer. Then what is it? Drav listened one more time. Carefully. Then. They're recording it, he said. The words settled into the room like something inevitable. Illyra's brow furrowed. Recording? For others, Drav said. For anyone listening. Cell's voice softened. So they don't make the same mistake. Drav didn't correct him. Because that was close enough. Another cycle of the signal echoed through the ship. Out into the system. Beyond it. Illyra looked back at the stars. They'll learn from it. Drav's gaze followed hers. Yes. A beat. Then she asked the question that mattered. What do we do? Drav didn't hesitate. Nothing. Cell glanced at him. Nothing. Drav nodded. We let it spread. The signal continued. Unchanging. Carrying outward. System to system. Species to species. Not explaining. Not negotiating. Just existing. A fact. A boundary. A memory in the making. Illyra exhaled slowly, some of the tension finally leaving her shoulders. Then they'll know, she said. Drav's voice was quiet. Yes. He looked out at the stars one last time, at a universe that had almost erased them, and failed. They'll know what happens, he said, when we stop waiting. Time passed, not measured in battles. In absence. No fleets arrived at the edge of the system. No distant shadows tested the perimeter. No signals probed. No scouts drifted too close. The silence held. And that, more than anything, felt unnatural. Cell adapted to it first. Not by rebuilding predictive models, but by dismantling them. I'm stripping anything that assumes pattern-based behavior, he said one cycle later, voice steady, precise. No more projections built on expectation. If something comes, we read it as it is, not what we think it will be. Illyra leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. That's how we survived before. Cell shook his head. No, he said. That's how we stayed predictable. She didn't argue, because she had seen what predictable looked like from the outside. Draft said nothing. He spent most of his time at the viewport, not watching for enemies, watching for movement. There was a difference. Days passed, or something close enough to days that the mind could hold on to it. The fleet shifted slowly, almost unconsciously drawing closer together. Not into formation, not into command structure, just proximity, shared gravity. Cell noticed it in the data. They're not responding to orders, he said quietly. They're responding to each other. Illyra glanced at the display. No central coordination? Cell shook his head. None. Drav didn't turn. They don't need it. The words settled easily now. Not as strategy, as truth. Another silence followed. But this one didn't feel empty. It felt watched. Not by something present. By something remembering. The signal still echoed. Faint now. Distant. Carried far beyond their range. Cell leaned back from the console. Someone's going to come, he said. Not a question. A statement. Illyra nodded slightly. They always do. Curiosity. Fear. Both led to the same place. Drav finally spoke. They won't come the same way. Cell glanced at him. What do you mean? Drav turned slightly, enough for his reflection to fall away. They won't test us directly, he said. Not after this. Illyra's brow furrowed. Then how? Drav looked back at the stars. Carefully. A soft tone interrupted them. Not an alarm. Not a threat. A contact. Cell straightened immediately. We've got something. Illyra pushed off the wall. Where? Cell adjusted the scan, eyes narrowing. Outer range. Just beyond the system boundary. Drav stepped closer. Configuration? Cell hesitated. That's the problem. Illyra's voice sharpened. Explain. Cell's fingers moved faster. It's a ship, he said. Single vessel. No fleet signature. No weapon charge. Illyra blinked. One ship. Cell nodded slowly. Just watching. The word landed differently now. Drav felt it settle into place. Open a channel, he said. Cell paused. It hasn't transmitted anything. Open it anyway. A beat. Then, channel open. Silence filled it. Deep. Unbroken. Illyra crossed her arms. They're not talking. Drav didn't respond. He stepped forward. Closer to the moment. Because this wasn't like the Vare. This wasn't calculation. This was caution. Transmit, he said. Cell glanced at him. What do I send? Drav's answer came without hesitation. Nothing. Cell blinked. Nothing. Leave it open. Illyra tilted her head slightly. You want them to sit in silence. Drav nodded. Yes. Outside, the distant ship held position. Not advancing. Not retreating. Just there. Listening. Waiting. Minutes passed. Then more. Long enough to matter. Cell watched the data. No movement, he said. No skin spikes. No weapon systems activating. Illyra's voice lowered. They're being careful. Drav's gaze didn't shift. They're being respectful. That word hung in the air. Unfamiliar. Cell exhaled slowly. That's new. Another moment passed. Then, the signal changed. Not the repeating broadcast. This was different. Direct. Focused. The unknown ship transmitted. Cell's console flickered. Receiving. Illyra stepped closer. What is it? Cell stared at the display. Then, it's the same pattern, he said. Illyra frowned. The signal. Cell nodded. But altered. Drav's eyes narrowed slightly. How? Cell adjusted the playback. The tones repeated. But this time, there was space between them. Intentional. Measured. Illyra listened carefully. They added pauses. Cell's voice dropped. They are responding. Drav understood. Not the language. The meaning. They're acknowledging it, he said. Illyra looked at him. Acknowledging what? Drav's answer came quietly. What we did. The signal repeated again. Not identical. Not random. Structured. Respectful. Sel leaned back slowly. They're not challenging us, he said. No, Drav replied. They're not testing us. Illyra's voice softened. They're making sure we see them. Drav nodded once. Yes. Another pause. Then she asked the question that mattered. What do we do now? Drav looked at the distant ship. At the way it held position. At the way it waited. Not to measure, but to understand the boundary. He took a breath. Then, close the channel, he said. Sel blinked. Close it. Illyra frowned. Why? Drav's voice stayed calm. Because they already know. The channel went silent. The distant ship didn't move. Didn't react. It simply remained. Watching. Careful. And after a long moment, it turned. Slowly. And left. No pursuit. No tracking. No attempt to follow. Just distance growing between them. Sel exhaled. They didn't even try to engage. Illyra watched the empty space where it had been. They didn't need to. Drav returned his gaze to the stars. Steady. Unchanged. But no longer misunderstood. They saw enough. Silence settled one last time. Not heavy. Not tense. Final. Because somewhere out there, beyond signals and systems and surviving fleets, a truth had already begun to spread. Not as a warning. Not as a threat. But as something far more dangerous. A certainty. Humanity will wait. Longer than you expect. Longer than you can understand. Long enough for you to believe you're safe. And when that waiting ends, there will be nothing left to learn from.